Coming up on This Week in Radio Tech, Paul Shulins is our guest. We're honored because he is the 2025 award winner of the NAB Engineering Achievement Award. That's a big deal. Chris Tarr is along too. He's a big deal. And we're going to talk about a number of different things, including careers in engineering, honoring those careers, and some technical things in Paul's life that he may give some predictions for the future. Lots of that. It's all coming up next on TWiRT.
This Week in Radio Tech is brought to you by Broadcasters General Store with outstanding service, savings, and support. Online at bgs.cc. By Broadcast Bionics with the Bionic Studio, including talk show control, social media, and visual radio. Broadcast Bionics brings exceptional audience engagement to radio and TV. By Air, featuring Playout One radio automation software, comprehensive streaming solutions, website content management, and social media tools for maximum listener engagement on the web at AIIR.com. By Angry Audio. Audio problems disappear when you get angry at angryaudio.com. And by Max Connect Wireless, prioritized high-speed internet service designed for transmitter sites and remote broadcasts.
Hey, welcome into This Week in Radio Tech, the show where we talk about everything from the microphone to that light bulb from the top of the tower. Hey, I'm Kirk Harnack. Delighted that you're here, as usual. I'm back in the Telos Alliance studio in Nashville, Tennessee, where I normally do the show from. We were off in Las Vegas for the past two shows. 2 weeks ago, we were at the Public Radio Engineers, the PREC, from the Tuscany Hotel and Suites and Conference Center. And then we did a show a little bit early last week. We did it on Tuesday from the Broadcast Bionics booth at the North Hall of the Las Vegas Convention Center. So we had a good time, and I'm so glad to be home, though. Las Vegas just wears you out. And I've been going there for, 33, 34 years, something like that. So I'm glad to be home. It's a beautiful day in Nashville, a spring day. Temperatures have been on the rise, and we've had a lot of sunshine the past couple of days. And that's my weather report. Chris Tarr is here, and he's got the weather in Mukwonago. Chris, welcome in. It's good to see you, sir.
Well, hello there, sir. Glad to be here. I have my Time Life Operator headset on here. Something's going wrong with my gear. As you can see, my office keeps getting messier and messier as I unpack stuff, and oh man, my wife is really mad at me about that. Anyway, here in Mukwonago, it's been rainy and kind of chilly. Supposed to get up to 70 tomorrow, but more rain over the weekend. So you know what they say up here: April showers bring May flowers. I'm hoping we're going to see a lot of flowers very soon with all this rain.
Yeah, I'd like to see some. Well, we've had some pouring rain. In fact, on my way to NAB, oh my goodness, that morning, what was it, a Wednesday morning? Yeah. Or was it a Thursday morning? Whatever it was. I was packing furiously during two tornadoes in our neighborhood. They didn't touch the ground, but they were on radar overhead in our neighborhood. And there were actually 4 active tornado warnings that covered my neighborhood. And then the sirens went off 4 times in my neighborhood. All that while I'm packing. And then we got to the airport, and they changed gates on us. Of course, that means they changed planes. And I had to ask, well, what was wrong with the first plane? They said, yeah, there was 2 inches of water in the rear galley because I said, did somebody leave the door? They said, yeah, somebody left the door open. So that didn't work out so well. Anyway, glad to made it to NAB and made it home. Hey, our guest today is somebody who figured prominently at NAB, and that's Paul Shulins. Paul, welcome into This Week in Radio Tech. It's good to see you.
Always good to be here. Thanks for inviting me. And I'm just back recovering. As you say, Las Vegas always is a time where you get pretty tired and you're on your feet a lot, but you also get to talk to a lot of people and see a lot of new things. So it was really cool. But I'm back in sunny Arizona where it's in the 60s today and pretty windy. So I was going to go up flying, but a little too much wind today. So I'm hanging out and talking to you.
Paul, I always think of you as a Northeast United States guy, but you're checking in from Arizona. Are you calling Arizona home these days?
I am, yeah, yeah. As people that know me know, I'm a Boston guy. Spent most of my career working for Greater Media in Boston, and lived in Andover, Massachusetts. Just moved out here right at the beginning of the pandemic because I was doing other things. And installing monitoring systems all over the country. So I could really work from anywhere. And my son was out here going to school, and I decided, why not? I'm into aviation and also astronomy. So this is a great climate for that. So had to wait a couple of years to get my house all settled because of the pandemic and the shortages of building supplies and stuff. But we're all over that now and settled in. And it's great to be in the Southwest for a change and see some new things and meet some new people.
Paul, welcome in. We're going to have a great conversation, not only about the award and the honor that you received at the NAB show, but kind of how you got there and the path that others may be on, or what we should recognize other engineers for their accomplishments, just as the NAB recognized you, and your peers in the industry recognized you as well. And then we've got some real technical things to talk about too, some ideas for now and ideas for the future. I shared a couple of these with Chris Tarr in our email before the show, but so Chris is going to have some fresh ideas too, and I'm going to freshen my browser here as we take our first quick break. Hey, our show is brought to you in part by my friends, including Ricky Lee at AIIR.com. Got to see them at the show, and I know we've been driving this home, but you ought to check this out. $20 a month internet streaming, web streaming for your radio station. Let's hear it from Ricky Lee. Hey, it's Kirk Harnack, and I'm here with Ricky Lee, the CEO of AIR. Ricky, you guys make a fantastic automation system, but streaming is a really big deal. Tell me about streaming with AIR.
It really is. We've got a beautiful streaming platform with an incredible dashboard with fantastic analytics. And you can buy it for just $20 a month, all you can eat. No limits on bandwidth or bit rates. And you can also record shows as well. So if you like to deliver on-demand content for $20 a month, you can stream and deliver that on-demand content to an RSS feed that can feed your radio player, your mobile apps, or a podcast that people can download and enjoy.
Now, $20 a month, that must be for just some slow MP3, right?
No, MP3, AAC, and we also now support HLS, which is big in the industry right now.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. How do I start to explore or find out more about streaming through AIR?
You go to air.com, AIIR.com/streaming, and from there, with a credit card, you can sign up and get started.
All right, let's see if my computer's working any better. Maybe Suncast, you can tell me in my earbuds if it's terrible. I don't know why. I know. I'm going to ask. We'll get into a question with a long answer from our guest Paul Shulins, and we'll see if we can make it any better. All right. Hey, welcome back, and thanks to AIR for sponsoring This Week in Radio Tech. So, Paul, the big story and the thing we're going to lead off with is this annual engineering award given by the NAB, one for radio, one for television, and that's the NAB Engineering Achievement Award. Why don't you tell us what that award is about, and why do you think they awarded it to you?
Wow. Well, yeah, first of all, I was really surprised to get the call from Sam Matheny back in February. It was funny because he kind of called me, and we're both, pilots. So he called me, and he never calls me. So I'm wondering, what's this all about? And he starts talking about airplanes. He's getting his airplane painted and blah, blah, blah. And I just, acquired an airplane. So we start talking for 10 or 15 minutes about aviation, and it was fun. Sam's a great guy. Many of you, I'm sure, know him. But anyway, so at the end of the conversation, he goes, by the way, you've been selected to receive the NAB Radio Engineering Achievement Award for 2025. And I was just silent. I didn't know what to say, at a loss for words. Then finally came to my wits and thanked him very much. But yeah, the award is given out every year And I think it started in 1959. They usually, when they started, they just had one award for broadcasting, broadcast engineering. And then I don't know how many years later, they started to have two awards, one for radio and one for television. And now they actually have three, one for radio, TV, and digital. And the award is basically an award that recognizes someone's career and someone's special contributions to the industry and advancement of the industry. It includes educational work that people have done and just things that make someone stand out and recognize that they've put in a little more or sometimes a lot more than basically they get paid for at their day job. So I was, just incredibly honored to receive that. I mean, legends in the industry have typically gotten this award, the Bob Orbans of the world, and Frank Fodes, and people that have invented devices that are used around the world. So I'm certainly not in that category, but I do different things, and it was really fun to rub elbows with some of the people that have gotten that award. And one of the interesting and kind of fun things that happens is there's a private reception after the ceremony where all the alumni get together and get a photo. And so I've been invited to some of those in the past. And now I'm one of them. So it was something I'll never forget, and something I'm eternally grateful to for the folks that nominated me, and also for NAB for coming up with this award that recognizes some of the leaders in the industry.
I'm sure Chris would agree with me that Paul, you've long been a voice of reason in the industry. By the way, I can't tell if I'm on or not. Suncast, are we doing any better, or do I need to?
Yeah,
that's worse. I don't know.
I mean, we can hear you. You're fine, but yeah, your video is pretty bad.
I have no idea why. I'll tell you what we're going to do, folks. Tell you what, Chris, why don't you and Paul carry on for a couple of moments, and I'm going to try to fix this problem. Of course, it wasn't here in the pre-show, or at least we weren't aware of it. So, Chris, if you do the honor, carry on with Paul for a minute, I'll be back in 5 or less. Okay.
Okie dokie. So,
okay.
Time to reboot.
Crazy. Yeah, got to go off and reboot. So, one of the things that that kind of ties in with this award is that it's, and I've been pushing for this a long time. Engineers often don't get recognized. There's a big push for, especially in the corporate environment, salespeople, programming, that sort of thing. But oftentimes engineers get forgotten, and they're kind of the unsung heroes. And I've always kind of felt like we need to do more as an industry to recognize that talent and that hard work. Now, I'm sure you agree. A lot of us kind of don't really think of ourselves that way. When you get an award, you're like, I'm just doing my job. I really shouldn't be awarded for that. But in all honesty, there's a lot of hardworking people out there, and there needs to be that recognition. What do you think about that?
Yeah, no, I agree, Chris. And one of the things that, I've noticed over the years, and I'm sure you have too, is that, it's not the glitziest job in the world, right? I mean, RF engineering and audio engineering, sometimes you get to meet famous people that come into your radio station, and that's kind of fun. But, the talent and the management and the programming people, well, they seem to have a lot of well-deserved recognition and well-deserved events that they attend, and the DJs and so forth that have been on the air and entertaining you for decades, they get a lot of good recognition. But the engineers, they're in a different category, I think, and thank God for the Society of Broadcast Engineers and NAB and the IEEE Broadcast Technology Society and other entities that do recognize some of the great talent in engineering that we have. And I do think that's a bit of a problem. Radio World does some good stuff as well, the magazine, the publication. But it's definitely not as glitzy, right, as some of these other jobs in radio that tend to get a lot more recognition. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but yeah, a lot of the engineers who work long hours and go through snowstorms and hailstorms to try and keep the stations on the air, you don't always hear about those stories.
And I think too that it also, doesn't help with recruitment, with trying to bring new engineers into the fold, because it is kind of a thankless job. And again, most of us, we're not in it for that. I know, we all do it kind of, we have it in our veins or whatever. But I joke, our Wisconsin Broadcasters Association has this big gala event every year for radio broadcasting and an awards gala, and there's no engineering going on in there. And to be fair, there's probably nowadays, there's probably 10 of us. So it would be, once again, you get the award because there's nobody else. But I do think that as we try to bring talent in, everybody wants to feel like they're appreciated. And, it's great to be recognized by your peers. But I do think that one of the many issues that we have facing us with recruitment and bringing people into the industry is something like that. But there are many other issues going on. What is your take on kind of bringing people in and the future of where we're going with this?
Yeah, exactly. Well, I do think there's a problem recruiting engineers, especially the type of engineers that are interested and are somewhat proficient already with RF engineering. And it's my opinion that RF isn't going away anytime soon. And it's also my opinion that many of our legacy geniuses with RF are either retiring or passing away because, they came in when RF was in its rudimentary stages, really. I mean, in the 1920s, 1930s, 1940s, and 50s, so forth, and people were working with equipment that was not nearly as reliable as it is today. And that required them to have a lot more fundamental understanding of how these devices worked, the tube type transmitters, for example. And nowadays it's kind of plug and play, right? Everything's solid state. And if something goes wrong, basically you go to the manufacturer and you get another one of those widgets and plug it in, and hopefully everything comes back up. So I guess my point is that a lot of the engineers today that are coming into the business are maybe somewhat reluctant to get into the more mundane science of RF engineering, and they are more apt to look at more of the glitzier type of job descriptions that have more to do with IT and web and streaming and all that kind of stuff. And I'm not saying that we don't need that, but I think it leaves a gap, and that's why I am concerned about the future for that reason. However, I will say, through my work with IEEE Broadcast Technology Society, we've started some initiatives that are highlighting students all around the world that are PhD candidates that are very bright and have a lot of basic understanding of the math behind RF. And I don't know if they're going to continue to go into that direction with their careers. I certainly hope so, but I see in this country anyway a challenge there, and I think we're gonna need to do a lot more work to try and recruit people to get back into RF.
Yeah. So, but Paul, you and Chris, thanks for filling in. Good questions. I was listening on the iPhone to the Facebook feed. So thanks for the question. But I'm curious to see, Paul, you mentioned PhD level people or candidates, and that doesn't seem like the sort of people who normally jump into a station level engineering position. Tell me how you think people are going to be fitting into our broadcasting situation in the future.
Yeah, and I think that's part of the problem. When I'm speaking of these PhD candidates, I'm really speaking through my experience with the IEEE Broadcast Technology Society, in where we have a conference called the BMSB, Broadband and Multimedia Conference, and it's usually not in the United States. But I did have a chance to go and speak at last year's, which was up in Toronto, so that wasn't a very long trip for me. We had about 130, 140 papers most of them were good papers that related well toward broadcast engineering. There were some kind of crazy ideas out there, but we need some of that, and not all of them are going to make it. But there are some real. I guess my point is there's some really bright minds out there that have some interesting ideas that can relate to broadcast engineering. Those candidates, like I say, come from all over the world, so I'm not sure how they would fit in domestically here in the United States, but the point I'm trying to make is that there are some really bright young minds out there that do have the potential to be good broadcast engineers that will understand in depth what RF engineering is all about. In particular with AM, who knows where AM is going these days, right? There's a big controversy about AM in the cars and that kind of thing. And are AM stations going to survive much longer? Hope they do. But who knows about AM directional arrays, right? Some of the greats that have designed these AM directional arrays, they're retired. So there aren't too many engineers that can go and tune up an AMDA. If AM is going to stick around, we're certainly going to need that kind of expertise.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, go ahead.
And I'm thinking in terms of my experience lately with the new company that I've co-owned with Jim Stenberg called Over the Air RF Consulting. We've certainly found a lot of potential for work, not only doing studies for moving sticks and maximizing population coverages and that kind of thing, but the radio stations and TV stations don't necessarily have either the expertise on hand or the ability for their engineers to do this kind of work. So there's a real hole in the industry for people with the kind of expertise that the consultants have these days. And so I think consulting is going to be a good business for a while. And I really hope that we can fill in the gaps with some full-time people. But I'm not sure where the industry is going. You and I had to talk a little bit about the future of broadcast transmissions and content delivery, and I'm happy to get into that a little bit because I think I have a personal opinion as to where that's going in the long term, which might be a lot different than how we distribute content today.
I wanted to add too that your discussion about consultants is really, I think, an important thing to discuss, because I find myself now I've got 22 full power stations and another like 15 translators or whatever that I'm directly responsible for. But I find myself I had contract clients as a contract engineer, that I started years ago. I've been doing this for 30 years. But over the past several years, I've really moved into that consultant role where I'm doing the higher level planning and, doing the frequency searches and the move-in studies, working on things like blown out transmission lines and antennas, while they have local people who are more kind of boots on the ground doing the, calling me and rebooting transmitters and things, because they're starting to realize that, to pay me to go up and restart a transmitter or check a fault light is really kind of like buying a Ferrari and driving it at 20 miles an hour, and it doesn't make a lot of sense. On the other hand, they're also finding that it's getting more and more difficult and prohibitively expensive to call in big guns when you're a small market station. And they know that I have access to some of these people for advice too. I like to call them the people smarter than me for advice. But also, over the years, I've gotten the experience to be able to do that a little bit more. And I think we're seeing more and more of that in the small market, which is what I deal with a lot of times, is small and medium markets. We're finding that a lot more, where there's become this hierarchy of kind of a regional engineering guy who works as a consultant for a bunch of stations. And then there are the contract engineers that kind of just go and, swap out modules and things like that. And the owners are looking for that advice that your company can provide, and people like me that can provide with bigger things, capital expenditures. What do you need to look for in terms of inspections, and what might your equipment needs be in the next couple of years. So that is something that is very important, and I think as well with RF people that is a potential career path if you're not the kind of person who definitely necessarily wants to be on call 24/7 to clear out a toilet or something, which unfortunately can be the job of a small market engineer. So I think there are some of those opportunities as well that really are going to come into play here very soon.
Yeah, no, I agree. You hit the nail on the head there, Chris. And, one of the things that the consultants are good at is looking at the big picture, and a lot of the broadcasters, the management and owners are looking for the best way forward from a technical standpoint. And many of the staff engineers are, like you said, there to keep the place on the air and be there for emergencies. But when it comes to the overall long-term strategy, there's a lot of tools and a lot of experience that some of these consultants that have been in business for decades can provide. Some of the tools, are too expensive for the radio and TV stations to maintain, such as coverage prediction software and that kind of thing. And not only, is the cost high for those kind of tools, but you also need the proper training and expertise to be able to effectively use those tools and, provide good results for the client. So, that's where I think the consultant's role really shines these days.
Well, and I think too that you can't get those skilled people like you used to be able to do. I mean, you could get it used to be, as you mentioned earlier, before these guys all started retiring, you could be a station in the middle of nowhere, Wisconsin, and have a really good, experienced engineer. That's not happening anymore, and it probably will not happen ever again. So, as people like to say, they wish they could clone me so that I could be doing all of these things, but I can't. And there's these small groups in Wisconsin that I've done some consulting for. They couldn't afford me full time, and number two, there isn't another guy like me that can do that. So as you mentioned, there's a lot of people that we can train at least immediately to do kind of the day to day, putting out the fires. But in the long term, you're probably not going to get somebody who can run those types of studies and do those types of things and be able to keep them on staff in a small radio group.
Yeah. Hey guys, it's Chris Tarr and Kirk Harnack, me, along with Paul Shulins, our guest, and we're finding out from Paul who was the this year's honoree, this year's award winner of the NAB Engineering Achievement Award, and our congratulations, our hearty congratulations go to Paul for that. It's This Week in Radio Tech. We've got more from Paul and Chris coming up, and we're going to be talking about some interesting possible distribution methods for what we now call radio that you may add to or may eventually supplant what we do now. And we'll get more of Paul's ideas on education. And Paul has some show and tell for us. It's all coming up in just a few minutes. Our program is brought to you in part by Broadcast Bionics. I got a chance to talk to Dan McQuillan, as you may know from last week's show. Dan has some really interesting ideas about AI, not for replacing disc jockeys, but for just adding to the information that's available to them and talk show hosts and so forth to make your show better. But right now, we're going to talk about the Bionic Studio from Broadcast Bionics.
Welcome to the Bionic Studio. The Bionic Studio brings all audience interaction to the fingertips of a production team in radio, TV, and podcast. Our workflow-led system is working 24/7 around the world for small broadcasters and national and international networks. Our telephony module, Bionic Talk Show, allows cost-effective centralization, remote operation, scalability, and resilience across an entire network of stations, but at the same time is used in single-studio self-op environments. Social media curation and activity is now considered a broadcast-critical part of programming. Bionic Social means the studio isn't overwhelmed with a wall of interaction from an ever-growing number of social platforms. We combine SMS, MMS, and email together with a speech-to-text service for listeners using smart speakers. We enable studio teams to curate, filter, and display all platforms in one place, and post text, images, and video content to multiple platforms in one operation. effortless collection of video content with Bionic Director has helped position some of the world's most successful stations as leaders in viral content, generating appointments to listen and free marketing via retweets and shares. Bionic Contest enables end-to-end tracking of on-air competitions, live reads, and prizes. These could be on-air contests, automated SMS entry, or online. Anywhere, and Skype TX for Radio brings high-quality audio and video contribution into the studio with ease. No need for dedicated PCs to run different applications. Everything is controlled within the Bionic Studio UI, and incoming connections are visible to users along with all other platforms. Our codec integration enables connection, algorithm configuration, and directory to a wide range of IP and ISDN codecs. The Bionic Studio, a unique suite of products designed to enable your talent to work smarter.
Work smarter. That's what Bionics is all about. In fact, we're going to have Dan McQuillan back on the show sometime later this spring or this summer, because Dan always brings a lot of cool information for us. We were talking about Chat GPT and how you could have just a conversation with your Chat GPT, and I've been doing that. Works quite well. Of course, Dan, he's modified his and made available a version for his kids. He calls it Dan GPT. It's like, because it gives fatherly advice along Dan's lines. Anyway, thanks Broadcast Bionics for sponsoring This Week in Radio Tech. Really innovative software and hardware solutions for broadcasters. Hey, Paul Shulins is here along with Chris Tarr, and we're talking about recognizing engineers, where engineers are going to come from, how they're going to fit into broadcasting. And gentlemen, one thing that is kind of maybe a happy coincidence, maybe it's just the way things work. It used to be when I started in engineering, Chris, probably you too, and Paul, I'm sure for you as well, that we were kept pretty busy by just little mechanical things that had to be taken care of all the time, like aligning cart machines, and replacing pinch rollers and replacing belts on turntables or Studer Revox reel-to-reel machines. There were a lot of things to do that were pretty mechanically oriented. And today, fast forward to 2025, we don't have nearly as many mechanical things as we used to. Now we have more. We probably have fans, air handling. We have fluid pumps in fluid cooled transmission systems. And then we have HVAC systems and things like that. But as far as the infrastructure for actually broadcasting, so much of it now is done with computers or computerized systems. And even though we complain about computers and what they have a mind of their own for going wrong, I'd say overall we're in far better shape than we were 40 years ago. I'm a lot less busy with busy work these days than I was 40 years ago. Any comment on that statement, gentlemen?
I agree. And a big aspect of that is safety too. When you talk about transmitters, right? We're using solid state transmitters now instead of the high voltage DC ones. And I'm sure you remember, many of our viewers probably remember tube type transmitters where we had lethal voltages there and you really didn't want to work alone. And unfortunately, I've seen a lot of close calls with people that were almost killed working by themselves. So you don't see that as much anymore because the voltages are lower and the safety measures that are built into these transmitters are much more reliable, I guess is the word. So that's a big thing. I think one of the things that hasn't gone away is the problem with antennas and transmission lines. Those voltages on those transmission lines are very high, and there's still a great need, of course, to take care of your antenna and make sure it's pressurized and all that kind of thing. So if there are problems there, that can be a dangerous situation and a costly situation, both in terms of downtime and repairs and stuff like that. So that really hasn't changed, Kirk, but I agree with you. I mean, for the most part, the stuff in the studios is a lot safer. They used to have tube consoles in the studios. I'm dating myself a little bit, but I do remember a couple of those Gates consoles that had the tubes in them, and there were some high voltages in there. So we are a lot better off in terms of reliability and personal safety.
Chris Tarr, I'm sure you've run across people who've installed turntables in studios and decided to take the turntable motor, the 110 volts, and run it up to the program audition switch on the console. And
or better yet, when you bring in the on-air light and you put the relay for it under the countertop, but you don't cover the relay up. Or even better, and I think I've shown this picture once or twice from the transmitter side I had, where in the back of the rack for the remote control, there's a piece of plexiglass that just says 120 volts behind this, and it was wide open relays. So yeah, no, I remember the bad old days.
Well, I guess for the most part, transmitter manufacturers are not bringing out 120 volts for us to control the transmitters anymore like they used to, Harris. Or Gates.
Or transmitters that start on fire, RCA.
Now, yeah, that's right. Now you've got the uber confusion of SNMP. So you call Chris Tarr to sort that through. Right.
That's why I love SNMP. Can't start that on fire.
Can't start that on fire, and
I've never heard of anybody getting electrocuted by SNMP.
Nowadays,
Paul,
right? I mean,
go ahead, Paul.
You remember what it was like to wire these audio consoles, especially the big ones in the old days. It took days and miles of 8451 going in and out and heat shrink and all that stuff. And nowadays, it's a single Cat5 connector that makes your whole console run. It's crazy.
Yeah, I can get a studio done in an afternoon. I mean, that's how crazy it's gotten.
Well, hey, those of you watching at home, I apologize for my apparently delayed video. I have no idea why this is going on. The MacBook Pro has been pretty good until I may try a different browser. But hey, Paul, how about you and Chris give some discussion to the 8 photos that Paul provided, and I'm going to use this segment to talk about those things, and then we're at our last segment. We're going to talk about some of Paul's notions about the future of radio distribution and how that might look different in 8, 10, 15 years from now. That we may not be doing what we're doing now. According to Paul, according to a lot of people. So, Suncast, you're standing by. Why don't you guys jump into into these photos, talk about them, and I'll be listening.
Okay, well, I'll just make some comments. These are some of the fun photos that I put together for NAB when they put together a tribute video the other day. So this is a young Paul Shulins back in 1978 at college in New Hampshire, and you're looking at me on a windmill, and we had a Class D FM station, which is where I cut my teeth in radio engineering. WPCR, Plymouth College Radio, was the name of the station. And it just so happened that the science department had this windmill, and they didn't really know what to do with it except to show people that it could produce electricity. And I said, well, why don't we run the radio station off it? It's only 10 watts. We had a Wilkinson transmitter that was a tube type, so it drew, a lot more than 10 watts, but it was still enough to, the windmill was still powerful enough to power the station. So, the windmill went down into the building, into the top of a stairwell, and we had lead acid batteries and an inverter, and I think it was just a 110 volt transmitter. And so I fed that off the windmill and the stored battery power, and it was enough to run the station for half the day, maybe 12 hours a day. It depends how windy it was. And we got a lot of publicity out of it. It was a lot of fun. People didn't think about going green quite as much back in the 70s as they do today. So it was kind of ahead of our time there, but it was a lot of fun, and it got the college a lot of publicity. So this is part of my work at Greater Media in Boston. When we moved into the consolidated building back in the 90s, when the FCC rules changed and allowed a single owner to own 5 FM stations in one market. We were one of the early adopters of that, and we took advantage, and we had 5 Class B FMs in Boston. And back in those days, CDs were just becoming popular to play music on the air. And one of the problems that I noticed with the CDs was that the DJs would scratch them, or they'd get lost, or they would skip, and all kinds of technical issues. And of course, they had the Denon players, which alleviated some of that. But even before that, I experimented with jukeboxes back in the 80s. And here I decided to make all the stations available to play CDs. And so I wrote some custom software, and we had each column was for one radio station, and we had 4 jukeboxes, and we used CDs that had, I forget the name of the company, but they provided the hits on 18 songs that we would likely play on one CD. And we duplicated that from the top to the bottom. Each CD player held 100 CDs. So we had 2 on the top and 2 on the bottom. And we could segue between any songs. And it alleviated the disc jockeys from having to handle the media, and actually kept all the discs in good condition. So it was a lot of fun. I think that was in use for about close to 2 decades there. And then hard drives, of course, got a lot cheaper, and we were able to.
It's interesting. I used a Digilink system, which did something similar with CD changers. And I do remember the problem was it was an early automation system, and you had to program in the tracks and the CD number and the jukebox and everything. And occasionally you get that wrong, and a song would play that you didn't want to have played.
Yeah.
And those hit discs from Century 21 often had different formats on the same disc. So you'd have 4 or 5 songs that were top 40, 4 or 5 that were rock, 4 and 5 that were country. And, more than once on our top 40 station, we had country songs play in the evening because the wrong CD would play. But yeah, that seems to be, there was that kind of in between there when hard drive space was at a premium when those CD players work. That's pretty clever. That's really cool.
Yeah, especially, when we were all trying to have linear stuff on the air and sound better than a competition. So CDs were linear, and that made it a lot easier. But yeah, I know what you mean, Chris, about the the putting the wrong song on. That was easy to do if you dialed in the wrong number. And so what we did was we used a barcode pen, and we printed out the music log with the barcode next to each song. And the DJs would just simply scan in sequentially 50 songs at once. And so the barcode made it less likely that anything that we didn't want to play. And it worked out.
That is impressive. That is amazing.
So it was a lot of fun, and it worked well for, like I say, probably about 20 years until the technology changed. This is a picture of the Prudential master antenna system. Some interesting stories behind that. This was developed in 1990 in order to reduce the RF exposure on the roof. The tower, the pole, there's a pole there in the center, and there's a tower around the pole, and all that was supplied by ERI. The original antenna is at the top. There's a pole antenna at the very top, which is TV, and then below that is the master antenna, original master antenna system for 4 FMs, and then below that, with the screens on it, was the new antenna, the master antenna that was wholly owned by Greater Media, and had 3 FMs on it. And it was an interesting story behind that. There was a call letter dispute from in Boston between CBS, who owned WBCN, and Greater Media, who owned WBCS. And CBS wasn't too happy with the fact that we had call letters in town that were so close to theirs. So they wouldn't let us come on the pole with our master antenna system. And we constructed a tower that actually didn't touch the pole. And we didn't really need permission at all from the other broadcasters to do this, because we just negotiated with the building to have it. So, we got it done, and that whole system there for 7 FMs is still in operation, as far as I know, and does a really good job because it's in the middle of downtown Boston and penetrates the buildings nicely. So this is an example. I just loved every day I went to work. I could do a lot of different things. Back in those days, broadcasting was different and the budgets were different. Greater Media and our director of engineering, Milford Smith, Smitty, as many of you know him, was one of the best directors of engineering in the business. And he believed in me. And we had good budgets at all of our stations to do things properly. One of the things that I did was put together this little system before it was really popular to have these automated switching systems. So if RF went away from one transmitter, it would warm up the filaments on the other and switch the coax switches and make sure that the station stayed on the air without operator intervention. So what you're looking at here is the control screen. It's a touch screen that enabled all that stuff to happen automatically and showed the status of what was going on. So this was a little bit before some of the transmitter manufacturers came up with their own auto switching stuff. I guess this is probably from the early 2000s. So I was just singing the praise of my old boss, Smitty. So there we are at an IEEE BTS event. I think that was in Florida or so. But many of you recognize that guy on the right there. One of the greatest directors of engineering, I think, in modern history. He's retired pretty much now, I think. But I stay in touch with him, and he received this very award in 2005.
Fantastic. All right, we got to take a quick break here and go over a few things. But we'll get back to the rest of the pictures here in just a second. Let's talk about Angry Audio. They are a sponsor of TWiRT. I love them. I love Catfish. I love everything they do. I'm going to talk about mic processing. Unfortunately, because just like the rest of the show today, with all the technical problems, my microphone isn't working through my computer. So I had to push it aside and use this little Time Life operator headset. But I have the Angry Audio Chameleon Rebel mic processor, and it is fantastic. Now, one of the things about mic processors is they have a bunch of knobs and a bunch of tweaking things, and you can never reproduce the settings correctly over and over and over again, which can be a problem. So they were talking, there's a solution there. There's a problem and a solution. So Catfish was talking about making a mic processor using some of that great Chameleon backend and the algorithms and, making something good. And, he was talking to Cornelius Gold and said to Corny, so Corny, why do mic processors have so many knobs? Can we make something, that's a lot easier to use? And he said, well, the problem is that every mic is different. And, there are so many different mics out there. That's why there are so many knobs, because you have to tailor it to each microphone. So, Catfish noodled on that a little bit and said to Corny, what if we knew what microphones we were plugging into it? And Cornelius said, you know what? That would help a whole lot, because we can set up in the software everything we need to make that particular microphone sound good. That is how the Rebel and the Smooth were born. The Rebel is called the Rebel because the RE in Rebel is for the RE20, and the SM in Smooth is for the SM7. These come pre-configured for that particular microphone. So right out of the box, you can plug it in and it sounds great. Do you like to tweak? There's a couple of things you can tweak on there. A DS, which is the first de-esser that I've actually used because I like it, as opposed to the old ones that make the sound dull. There's a gate, and then there's the compression level and a low and a high tweak. And it's not a huge, none of these knobs do a whole lot, because that's not, you defeat the purpose. But they can tailor the sound to really dial it in perfectly. So instead of having all of these different knobs, you have like 4 controls. And you don't even have to touch them if you don't want to. If you want to just plug it in out of the box and go, it sounds great right out of the gate. So again, if you're looking for consistency between all of your announcers, consistency between the mics, if you have the same kind of microphone in your plant and you want them all to sound the same, because even with the other models, you can tweak it and have the knobs in the same position, but they don't ever quite sound the same. These sound the same over and over, and the SM7 and the RE20s all of a sudden sound the same. They have that great quality sound because of the Audio Chameleon, the Rebel, and the Smooth. Get them today from Angry Audio. You can check them out online at angryaudio.com. You can also call your favorite broadcast distributor and pick them up there. The Rebel and the Smooth from Angry Audio, the Audio Chameleon, get them today. They sound fantastic. So be sure to check it out and thank them for supporting TWiRT. Speaking of Angry Audio. They have partnered with MaxConnect to come up with the U192 device. Now, this thing is very cool because, oftentimes we like to use, playing with software, and the audio processing software has come a long way over the past years. What used to be, you'd run it on a computer, maybe it would work, but you'd have to have some kind of stereo generator, or, there'd all these, old internet bulletin boards that say, okay, if you get this particular sound card, it can pass audio enough, it has enough bandwidth to do the audio baseband along with the RDS, the stereo pilot, all of that stuff. But they were pretty rare, and you had to get certain, in fact, you could buy certain cards, tweak them, make it all work. Hopefully it wasn't tilted one way or another, and you were able to get the full bandwidth out of it. It was difficult. What if you had something that you could plug into your computer, and you'd have the connection in the back for composite, and it passed everything? Well, that's where Josh Bond and the guys at MaxConnect partnered up with Angry Audio to build the box, and they've got the U192 MPX USB sound card. No more guesswork. You plug it into the back of your computer, and then you've got composite output, you've got digital and analog outputs, and you can use the software like Stereo Tool or something like that actually has RDS built in, and you can use that as your main audio processor, and you can use this interface to feed your transmitter. Now, it's unlike, those old sound cards that, maybe are cheaply made. This is purpose-built just for this. It's got, the clean audio transformer. It's got the clean components. And of course, with the Angry Audio design, it sounds fantastic. So, it's a real testament to how far we've come, and you can roll your own processing. So, you can compete with some of the big boys without having to spend that money by just getting Stereo Tool or, whatever software. I know Omnia makes the SST, all of these different things. You can get that software and connect it to your computer, and make it work with the U192 MPX USB sound card. Plug and play, get it today. Again, talk to the folks at MaxConnect, who are doing some fantastic things. Check out their website, MaxXKONNECT, and we thank them for their support of TWiRT. So, Kirk is somewhat back. Hello there, my friend.
Hey, well, I don't think we're going to show my video because it's terrible. I you know what? I think my MacBook just needs about 2 more reboots, and then things will be happy. So we're gonna do that.
Sounds great, though. Your audio sounds great.
Well, hey, well, I'm trying, and I don't know what it is, but okay, computers are they can do what they want. You two are doing great, and I'm happy listening to the feed over Facebook, or you can watch live on YouTube as well. Chris, Paul and I thought we'd cover one more topic, area of topic here. You guys went through the pictures, great. If there's any more pictures you want to get to, that's fine too. But we also want to get to Paul's thoughts about radio being distributed in other means. One of those may be ATSC3. We've actually had a show about that maybe a year and a half ago. And then another possibility is just more shared resources between television, over-the-air television, and our over-the-air broadcasters to see if there's any possibilities for radio becoming, in some ways, more effective, better sounding, similar coverage area to television stations, and sharing tower resources or other resources. So I'm just going to sit back and listen to you two chew the fat on these ideas and get these ideas out there, and I'll see if we can get a better video signal when I come back.
You probably know a lot more about ATSC3 than I do, so go right ahead.
Well, yeah, and I don't think it's all about TV, but I just wanted to bring up the general concept of what where we're going, and where I personally think we might be going with content distribution, especially for radio. And you think about where we are today. I mean, all the radio stations have pretty much their own transmitters, right? They may not have their own antennas because we've already come a ways in terms of consolidated resources with master antenna systems that are great. But is this the best way to distribute our content in the long term? And I don't know where things are going to end up. I have my opinion, and I'll give it here. I think in the long term, things are going to be consolidated in terms of content distribution. And what I mean by that is, for example, and I'll use ATSC3 TV as an example, there is a lot more bandwidth and opportunity to distribute all kinds of information, TV programs in high definition, multiple sub-channels, and data that doesn't even have anything to do with radio or TV. And I think you're going to see a lot more of that in the future. But when it comes to FM broadcasts or AM broadcasts for that matter, distribution is possible through some of the bandwidth that TV stations can allocate using ATSC3. So I think that's an interesting concept. And then I think, if we look at a broader picture, maybe in the future, radio stations won't have their own transmitters, but a more efficient way of distributing the content may be maybe not a TV station, but a radio transmission system that has enough bandwidth to supply the whole market with everybody's transmissions. So maybe audio processing would still be separate, and coverages would be possibly similar. But I think in the interest of just efficiency, in terms of energy efficiency and going green and all that kind of stuff, I think, 50 years from now, who knows what radio is going to look like, but I have a hard time believing that everybody's going to have their own transmitters and towers still. I think the transmission methods will be changing, and it'll be a lot more efficient. Who knows?
I know Jeff Welton. Jeff Welton did a presentation a while back where he used HD radio in a mode and with wide enough bandwidth that he was able to put, I don't remember what it was, 5 or 7 or whatever stations on one transmitter. And I know, what is it, the standard overseas DAB, where they can do that as well. We're single transmitter with different stations on there. I know that one of the problems that was talked about is just the political issue of that, where, what about if my coverage was, on a tower much better than the guy in the same class station, but on the other side of town, all of a sudden now we all have parity, and all of that. Those kind of little things go away, which politically can be a little bit challenging. But I do agree with you in that at some point, just like now you're seeing a lot of situations. You were talking about the greater media and CBS with the antenna thing. I think we're all seeing now with the companies like American Tower and Vertical Bridge taking over that stuff, that you're getting a lot more shared services, shared spaces. And I think that's going to continue. And I know the FCC has really been pushing for that in terms of their flexibility with, the AM, especially with the AM rules now, with, the ratchet rules and things like that, kind of making it easier for rebuilding AMs and combining them on combined sites and things like that. So I agree with you. I think that's certainly going to continue, and it'll be interesting to see. I don't know that I'll be around, how things are going to change with that kind of distribution.
Yeah, no, I agree, Chris. And, we're already seeing tower companies talk about, offering distribution and as a service, right, as a subscription service. So maybe a tower company in the future would offer, hey, you supply us with your audio and we'll take care of the transmission part. You don't need a transmitter engineer. We're going to handle all that. Just hand off your content to us and we'll make sure it gets out, and it's reliable, and it's technically complying with all the FCC rules and that kind of thing. So I don't know if that's going to happen, but it's certainly being talked about now. And with the lack of engineering talent that's available, and the lack of budgets to pay engineers, that may be something that will take off. I just don't know.
Well, I think it's in France. I could be wrong about that, where actually the transmitters are owned by somebody else, and the radio companies lease that or whatever, that transmission system. So I think you're right in that that's certainly a possibility where you start doing broadcasting as a service kind of thing, where you get a company that handles all of the technical parts of that, and the radio companies just bring the content. And all of a sudden now, just like they've started doing with tower space, we when I was with Intercom, when we sold off all the towers to American Tower, that was one of the discussions is we're not that we weren't a tower company. We spent time leasing and managing and paying taxes on that, and that's not really what our core business was anymore. And it made a lot more sense financially to hand that off and lease it back. And I think what you're saying is that might be a model for in the future for everything else, just basically selling off all of those assets and basically having a company handle that technical part and be responsible and all those sorts of things, which I think is interesting. And if you think about it, I think you could get into even that company provides the IP service for streaming and content delivery and that kind of thing, which is really that's pretty interesting.
Yeah, and I think if it goes that way, it really changes the landscape of broadcasting because, from an engineering standpoint, the better engineer you had, generally the better coverage maybe, and the better sounding station, right? If engineers knew how to tweak those processors and, get the best antenna for their market and that kind of thing, they'd get a competitive advantage. And I think that's a good thing, right? And that might go away. That's kind of the flip side of this. If everything gets kind of homogenized in terms of the distribution, you may not have those advantages. So it's a changing landscape. I'm not sure if it's good or bad. It's certainly more efficient.
And certainly from a regulatory standpoint, it certainly makes things a lot easier because, you're not having to deal with the regulatory stuff with tower registrations and transmitters and maintaining that sort of thing too. So that can get handed off as well. So Kirk, you look fantastic. You look like I can't hear you now. Your microphone is off. So nope, no microphone, Kirk. No audio. I can't hear you. So we got one, but not the other now. So his audio is probably going to be horrible and his video is going to look really good. Now he's frozen.
All right. How about now? How about
all right?
now?
Your video isn't quite as good, but we can hear you.
Do I have a tip of the week for you coming up next?
Right. No kidding.
I have discovered something that, I think I learned about 200 episodes ago, so we'll pass that along. But I've been listening along right here on the old Facebooks, and it's been great. It's great to hear your everybody's thoughts on this. And it is going to be time for our tip of the week right after this final commercial message. So, gentlemen, if you will stay tuned, and let me fix the video here because I can at least fix that. I think I can. There we go. There we go. That's
you look good.
Better. A little better shading. Okay. Hey, by the way, today's episode of the Chris and Paul Show has been brought to you in part by our friends at Broadcasters General Store, and a tool that many of you, really might need. Now, I realize there's a lot of different remote control systems on the market out there, but one of the ones that you may feel very comfortable in installing and using, it kind of crosses the barrier between older technology and newer technology. It's got newer features in it, and that is the Broadcast Tools WVRC 8 Plus. Yeah, this unit right here that you're having a look at right there, the WVRC 8 Plus from Broadcast Tools. And any product made by Don Wingett, oh my goodness, it's going to have a lot of features built into it. And this does. For example, it's got an NTP time base or battery backed up real-time clock calendar with better than 2 minutes a year accuracy. And that means, if you do use this for AM time, pattern changes, day, night, it's going to stay accurate within 2 minutes all year long. It's got plenty of channels to bring in, so you can take meter readings, so you can take status readings, so you can give outputs and inputs. It's got an internal temperature monitor. It's got a jack for an external power failure power supply, so you can see, hey, is my power on at the site? The power that normally would run the transmitter, is that working or not? It's got a stereo silence sensor monitoring with remote telco monitoring. It has an internet down alarm feature that tells you, hey, your internet's down, because it does heartbeat pings. Front panel microphone, so you can remotely listen to the site. Oh my goodness, it sounds like the bearings are leaving in our building fan here. It has a simple telco hybrid with send, caller, and balanced audio I/O. 100 event program scheduler for relay control and alarm muting. Front panel local operate switch with LED indicators. You can, before you lock that transmitter room, you can see, hey, did I leave it in remote control? And so many features here. And by the way, of course, since this goes at your transmitter site, it's fully RFI shielded, and it's a 1RU rack mounted package. So it fits right in your rack. It's got front panel indicators for the input status, for the output, for the relay output status. This is a great little remote control, and it's both web and voice dial-up. So, no matter what connectivity you have to your transmitter site, or maybe you have both, but you can access this remote control 2 different ways, and that can come in really handy. Broadcast Tools, if you're familiar with that company, they make a lot of things that will help run your radio station, make your life as an engineer easier. And the WVRC 8 Plus remote control is one of those. You should check it out from Broadcasters General Store, their website, bgs.cc. They've got, I just met with these guys last week at the NAB Show. What a great bunch of people at BGS, Broadcasters General Store. And you know what? They love to talk to you on the phone. And that's a real benefit. You can be driving down the road and you need something, you need an answer, you need to know, how soon can I get this? How much does it cost? Is there any discount available? Do you have any alternatives that maybe cost less or maybe do more things? Call them at 352-622-7700. Broadcasters General Store in Ocala, Florida, but they got people working from home all over the place. And you're going to enjoy, if you haven't worked with BGS, you're going to enjoy working with them. They're good people. All right. Thanks a lot, BGS and Broadcast Tools, for sponsoring This Week in Radio Tech. We have got scant little time, and I'm going to see what Paul and Chris may have first for a tip of the week. Paul, would you grace us with some wisdom for the ages? What should we know about? What do you want to leave us with?
Well, I want to leave you with something I've talked about on this show before, and that is complacency and the danger of complacency. I was thinking about this. I know we talked about it at length maybe a year or 2 or 3 ago, but it reminds me of a time I was up in the Prudential building, and everything works so well these days, but we don't think about how things are designed. And I had a electrical problem out there, and it took me a while to really remember how things go. So I think what I want to leave everybody with is the fact that you don't want to get complacent, even though things are running really well. Try and review your transmitter plant on a regular basis so that you're familiar with what's going on. And that's going to save you a lot of time in a crisis situation where, hey, there's no power up here, or this control system is down. What does it do? How do I get around it? That kind of thing. It's easy to get complacent. We're all busy doing a million different things, and the reliability of stuff is so good these days that you don't actually get a chance to practice. So there's my 2 cents.
Good advice. Chris Tarr, what's your tip of the week for us today?
I was going to mention, as you were doing the Broadcasters General Store ad, that I was actually emailing the folks there to place an order. So that's how great they are. So anyway, my advice today is for especially engineers in the northern half of the country. This is the time of year to start looking at spring cleaning. Getting the sites cleaned out, making sure that all of the rodents from over the winter are gone, make sure the generators are in good shape, because lightning season is coming. So that also means checking all of your grounding, making sure that with the cold weather nothing snapped or got blown in the wind or anything like that. So just generally spend some time in the next week or 2 at your transmitter sites and take a look at all of those things from over the winter and make sure you're all set for the rainy season and the lightning season.
Good point. Especially that lightning season. Yeah, if you like me, you bought a surge suppressor, but you didn't get into putting it in yet. get to the transmitter site and put it in.
Well, and
Make
also
sure
remember that those surge suppressors have a limited life. So, if it's taken a lot of hits, it'll be time to replace it.
So my tip of the week, and usually I don't have one, but rather than go through all the problems that I just had with a computer that's normally extremely reliable and so forgiving, my tip is use things often enough to where you recognize when they're operating correctly. And then when they're not operating correctly, take note, hey, this isn't working well. And on my Mac, Macs, you can put your tray down at the bottom, and as you mouse over the tray on a Mac, the different icons, kind of magnify and then get smaller as you move the mouse back and forth. What I should recognize, because I know this, I forgot it, is that, because it hasn't happened in so long, is that if something's wrong, if something's bogging my Mac down, there's a little herky jerkiness in the smoothness of the animation of those icons. And since I ended up rebooting twice, but the second time I booted from a cold, hard, dead start, and that seemed to fix everything. And now if I mouse over the icons, they are smooth as glass. And so that applies to so many things. Recognize proper operation. And when that ain't right, that should be your clue that something's wrong that you need to fix. And so, yeah, if I wasn't familiar with this Mac, I would never have figured that out. But rebooting it from a cold, dead start fixed. And I also had to take my USB interface and use a different USB input for some reason. The one it was plugged into wasn't happy either. So, Paul, thank you so much for taking the time to join us. Congratulations on your award. No one could be more deserving. Yeah. And we're going to put your website, your over-the-air broadcast consulting, which is OTARF. So it's all abbreviated here, OTARF.com. That's Jim Stenberg and Paul Shulins. And Paul, do you have a website for your astrophotography?
Yeah, I still have my old website up. It's schulinsolutions.com, and it's got a section there. I've rolled in my business into my partnership with Jim, but that old website is still up, and it's got a section for astrophotography. I'm going to probably roll that into the new website at some point. But if people want to look at some of the work, they can go there. And Kirk, I want to thank you so much for inviting me. It's been kind of a crazy week last week. Still just, kind of catching my breath and stuff. And I'm just so honored to receive the award and honored to work with folks like you and Chris. And I thank you for doing what you're doing. I mean, 700 and some odd shows. My goodness. How many years now?
It's been almost coming up on 16. Yeah.
Crazy. So thank you for doing that. I am honored to be on the show and happy to come back anytime you need me.
And apparently after we get to show 1000, I can quit and Chris can just keep on going. Chris, you make a good morning man. You know that?
There you go.
Chris, thank you. In all seriousness, thank you for taking over for the part of the show I couldn't be here, which was most of it. So I appreciate that. Also, thanks to Suncast for suggesting solutions to get my connectivity back in place. And hopefully next week, we'll be back and we won't have that problem. We may have a really interesting show next week about some of the regulatory changes that the NAB is asking the FCC to make. And there could be some big things coming. Maybe not much will come of it. I don't know. But we're going to have a good time talking about that. I hope that's our topic. Big thanks again to Paul Shulins and to Chris Tarr. Also big thanks to Suncast, our producer. We got to go. We'll see you next week on This Week in Radio Tech. Bye-bye.